My wife was screwing my best friend in our marital bed while I was fixing Mrs. Henderson's transmission 3 blocks away. I didn't know it yet, but I'd find out in the most humiliating way possible, through a live stream that half our neighborhood would watch. But let me back up. My name is Tom Foster, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. 41 years old, owner of Foster's Auto Repair on the good side of town, married to the most beautiful woman on Avery Lane. Renee Foster, blonde, ambitious, the kind of woman who could convince you black was white and make you thank her for the privilege. "Tom, you're working late again," she'd say, standing in my shop doorway in that little sundress that made every man in the neighborhood forget their own wives' names. "The kids barely see you anymore." She was right, of course. Max, our 16-year-old, spent most evenings helping me at the shop rather than doing homework. The twins, Lily and Grace, were 11 and had started treating me like a stranger who occasionally showed up for dinner. And Olivia, our 19-year-old, was away at college, calling less and less each month. "Business is good, Renee. I'm trying to build something here." I wiped my hands on a greasy rag, leaving black streaks that would never fully wash out. "For us, for the kids." "I know, baby." She walked over and kissed my cheek, leaving a perfect lipstick print. "But don't forget to live a little. Speaking of which, Nicole's throwing another one of her parties this weekend. You should come." Nicole Brennan lived 2 houses down and threw what she called adult game nights every month. I'd been to exactly one and spent the entire evening watching married couples flirt with each other's spouses while pretending it was all innocent fun. "I'll think about it," I lied. Renee smiled that smile, the one that had gotten me to propose after 6 months of dating, the one that had convinced me to take out a second mortgage to buy the house on Avery Lane. "That's what I love about you, Tom. You're so predictable." At the time, I thought she meant it as a compliment. The first real sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in March. I'd closed the shop early to surprise Renee with dinner from Romano's, the Italian place where we'd had our first date. When I pulled into our driveway, Brian Dorsey's silver BMW was parked in front of our house. Brian, or Bree, as everyone called him, had been my best friend since we were 12. We'd played Little League together, double-dated in high school, been each other's best man. He sold real estate now, made 3 times what I did, and had the kind of easy charm that made people trust him with their biggest investments. I found them in the kitchen, sitting close together at our breakfast bar, sharing a bottle of wine I'd been saving for our anniversary. "Tom!" Bree jumped up like he'd been caught stealing. "Didn't hear you come in." "The door was unlocked," I said, setting the takeout bags on the counter. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Renee said smoothly. "Bree was just telling me about this amazing property that came on the market. 3 acres right on the lake. Sounds expensive." "Everything worthwhile is," Bree said, refilling his wine glass. "But with the equity you've built up here plus the shop's value." "I'm not selling the shop." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, Renee stood and started unpacking the takeout containers. "Of course not, honey. We're just dreaming out loud." She kissed my forehead. "You know how I love to dream." Bree left 20 minutes later, but something felt different. The way Renee kept checking her phone during dinner, the way she'd avoided eye contact when I asked about her day, the way she went to bed early, claiming a headache. I should have trusted my instincts. Instead, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. The second sign came a week later. I was under the hood of a 98 Camaro when Max wandered into the shop, backpack slung over his shoulder. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." I didn't look up from the engine. The alternator was shot, and the owner, a kid barely older than Max, was hoping I could work some magic to avoid the $300 replacement cost. "Do you and Mom ever, I don't know, talk anymore?" That got my attention. I straightened up, wiping my hands. "What do you mean?" "It's just..." Max shifted his weight from foot to foot, the way he did when he was nervous. "She's been different lately, always on her phone, always going out with Nicole and those women. And when you try to talk to her, it's like she's not really listening. Your mother has friends, Max. That's healthy." "Yeah, but..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. That night, I paid attention. Really paid attention. Renee checked her phone 17 times during dinner. She laughed at something on the screen twice, then quickly put it face down when she caught me watching. When I asked about her day, she gave vague answers about meetings and paperwork. When I suggested we watch a movie together, she said she had an early morning and went upstairs. I found her in our bedroom, door closed, talking in hushed tones to someone on the phone. When I knocked and entered, she quickly ended the call. "Work stuff," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You know how it is." But I didn't know. Renee worked in human resources for a mid-sized insurance company. What kind of HR emergency required secret phone calls at 10 o'clock at night? The third sign, the one that should have been a flashing neon warning, came 2 weeks later. I was running late for dinner, having spent an extra hour trying to resurrect a transmission that should have been put out of its misery years ago. When I finally made it home, the house was empty except for the twins, who were eating cereal in front of the TV. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "Nicole's," Lily said without looking away from her show. "Again?" "She said they were planning something special," Grace added. "Some kind of surprise party." I called Renee's cell. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later with the same result. She finally came home after 11, smelling like wine and wearing a smile I hadn't seen in months. "Sorry I'm late," she said, kicking off her heels. "We got carried away planning Sarah Mitchell's birthday party. You know how Nicole gets when she's organizing something?" Sarah Mitchell lived on the other end of Avery Lane. I'd spoken to her maybe 3 times in the 5 years we'd been neighbors. "Since when are you and Sarah Mitchell close enough to plan her birthday party?" Renee paused in the middle of removing her earrings. "We're all neighbors, Tom. It's called being social. You should try it sometime." The barb hit its mark. I'd never been good at the neighborhood social scene. While Renee charmed everyone at block parties and HOA meetings, I was usually working or hiding in my garage, tinkering with whatever project was keeping me sane that week. "Maybe I will," I said. "Good. In fact, Nicole's having another game night this Saturday. You should definitely come." Something in her tone made me look up. She was watching me carefully, like she was waiting for a specific reaction. "Okay," I said. "I'll be there." For just a moment, her smile faltered. "Really?" "Really." Saturday night, I showered, put on my best shirt, and walked 2 houses down to Nicole Brennan's perfectly manicured colonial. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. I could hear laughter and music from the backyard, see the glow of tiki torches through the side gate. Nicole answered the door, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly car payment. "Tom, I'm so surprised to see you. Renee said I should come." "Of course she did." Nicole's smile was bright and sharp. "Well, come on in. Everyone's out back." The backyard was transformed into something that looked like a movie set. String lights hung between the trees, a full bar was set up near the pool, and at least 20 people were scattered around in small groups, all holding drinks and talking in the animated way people do when they're trying too hard to have fun. I spotted Renee immediately. She was standing near the pool with Bree and another couple I recognized but couldn't name. She was laughing at something Bree was saying, her hand resting on his arm in a way that made my stomach clench. "Tom!" Bree called out when he saw me. "Didn't expect to see you here, buddy." "Full of surprises," I said, accepting the beer someone handed me. The evening started innocently enough. We played some ridiculous game where you had to guess which spouse said what embarrassing thing. Renee and I lost spectacularly, mainly because I apparently knew nothing about my wife's secret desires or hidden fantasies. "Come on, Tom," Nicole said when I failed to guess that Renee's biggest fantasy was running away to Italy with a mysterious stranger. "You've been married 15 years. You should know this stuff." "Apparently not," I said, taking a long pull from my beer. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed more freely, the games became more intimate. Someone suggested truth or dare, like we were teenagers at a slumber party. The truths got more personal, the dares more suggestive. When it was Renee's turn, she chose dare. "I dare you," Nicole said with a wicked grin, "to kiss the person in this circle you find most attractive. Besides your husband, of course." The group erupted in giggles and catcalls. I waited for Renee to roll her eyes to make some joke about how ridiculous this all was. Instead, she walked directly to Bree and kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek or a friendly smooch. A real kiss. The kind of kiss that made everyone else go quiet and made my blood turn to ice water. When they finally broke apart, Renee looked directly at me. "Your turn, honey. Truth or dare?" I set down my beer and stood up. "Actually, I think I'll head home. Early morning tomorrow." "Oh, come on, Tom," someone called out. "Don't be a party pooper." But I was already walking toward the gate. Behind me, I could hear Renee making excuses, telling everyone I was tired, that I worked too hard, that I didn't know how to have fun anymore. She was right about that last part. I was about to learn exactly how much fun I'd been missing. Hash. Chapter 2. The video that broke everything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her breathe, wondering how long she'd been lying to me, wondering how long my best friend had been lying to me, wondering if I was losing my mind or if everyone else had lost theirs. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the shop. Work was the only thing that made sense anymore. Engines had problems you could diagnose and fix. They didn't lie to you or kiss your best friend at parties or make you feel like you were going crazy. I was elbow deep in a brake job when Max showed up around noon with sandwiches from the deli down the street. "Figured you might be hungry," he said, handing me a turkey club. "Thanks, kid." I wiped my hands and sat down on an overturned crate. "Shouldn't you be doing something teenage on a Sunday? Playing video games or ignoring your homework?" "Mom's got her book club over. They're loud." "Book club?" "Yeah, Nicole and Sarah and Mrs. Patterson from down the street. They've been meeting every Sunday for the past month." Max took a bite of his sandwich, then looked at me carefully. "They don't actually talk about books much." "What do they talk about?" "I don't know. I just know they laugh a lot and drink wine, and sometimes I hear them talking about—" He trailed off, his face reddening. "About what?" "Grown-up stuff, like relationship stuff." I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. "What kind of relationship stuff?" "Dad, I really don't want to—" "Max, what kind of relationship stuff?" He sighed and put down his sandwich. "Last week, I heard Mom telling Nicole that marriage was like a prison sentence and that some people were lucky enough to find ways to, I don't know, get weekend passes or whatever." The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. "And yesterday, after you left the party early, I heard her on the phone with someone. She was laughing and saying something about how you were so clueless that she could probably— Well, she used a word I'm not supposed to say." "What word?" "The F word, Dad. She said she could probably F you over in front of your face and you'd thank her for it." I stared at my 16-year-old son, seeing the worry and confusion in his eyes, and felt something inside me break. Not break like a bone breaks, sharp and sudden and painful. Break like a dam breaks, slowly at first, then all at once. "Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, though we both knew I wasn't. "Yeah, I'm fine." That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I went home early and searched my wife's things. I started with her dresser, then her closet, then her car. I found receipts for restaurants I'd never been to, hotel bars in the city, lingerie I'd never seen her wear. In her glove compartment, I found a burner phone I didn't know she owned. The phone was password protected, but Renee had never been particularly creative with passwords. Our anniversary date got me in on the second try. What I found made me wish I'd never looked. Text messages going back months, photos I never wanted to see, video files with names like Saturday Fun and While Tom's Working and Best Friends Forever. But it wasn't just Bree. There were messages from at least 4 other men, including Ethan Patterson, our neighbor whose wife was apparently part of the Sunday book club. There were group chats with names like Avery After Dark and Weekend Warriors that detailed a whole secret world happening right under my nose. The worst part wasn't the sex. It was the way they talked about their spouses. The jokes about how stupid we were, how easy we were to fool, how pathetic we were for not knowing what was happening in our own neighborhood. There was one message thread that made me physically sick. Renee: "Tom's working late again. Shocker." Nicole: "Perfect. Bree's already here. Should we start without you?" Sarah: "Give us 10 minutes. Ethan's putting the kids to bed." Renee: "God, I love how predictable he is. Same routine every night. Shop until 8, dinner, TV, bed by 10. It's like being married to a robot." Nicole: "At least your robot makes decent money. Mine can barely manage the mortgage." Renee: "Not for much longer. Bree's been looking at the shop's books. Tom's been hiding money in accounts he thinks I don't know about. Cute, right?" Sarah: "What are you going to do?" Renee: "What do you think? Community property laws are beautiful things, especially when your husband is too trusting to get a good lawyer." I screenshotted everything. Every message, every photo, every video file. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to my garage to throw up. When Renee came home that evening, she found me in the living room watching TV like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing the top of my head. "Fine. How was book club?" "Oh, we're reading this romance novel. Very educational." She laughed at her own joke. "I'm going to take a shower. The twins are at my mother's tonight, so it's just us." "Where's Max?" "At Jake's house, sleepover." She headed toward the stairs, then paused. "Actually, Tom, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." "Yeah?" "I've been thinking we should take a vacation, just the 2 of us." Maybe Europe? I saw this amazing hotel in Rome. The same Rome she'd mentioned in her fantasy at Nicole's party. The same Rome she'd been researching on her phone, according to her browser history. Sounds expensive. Well, that's the thing. She sat down on the arm of my chair, running her fingers through my hair. Bree thinks we could get a really good price for the shop right now. The market's hot, and with all the development going on downtown. There it was. The real reason for the sudden affection, the European vacation, the concern about my working too much. I'm not selling the shop, Renee. I know, baby, I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying we have options. We could sell, take some time to travel, maybe start fresh somewhere new. Start fresh. Exactly. She leaned down and kissed my neck. Doesn't that sound amazing? No more 12-hour days, no more grease under your fingernails, no more worrying about making payroll every month. And what would I do in this fresh start? Whatever makes you happy. Maybe you could teach or consult or... She shrugged. We'd figure it out together. Together. Right. Let me think about it, I said. Of course. There's no rush. But her smile said otherwise. I'm going to go shower. Why don't you open a bottle of wine? We can talk more about it. After she went upstairs, I sat in the dark living room and made a decision. If Renee wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd play to win. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the city. I had 3 stops to make: a private investigator, a lawyer, and an electronics store that specialized in surveillance equipment. The private investigator was a former cop named Jake Morrison, who'd helped me out a few years back when someone was stealing from the shop. He listened to my story without judgment, looked at the screenshots I'd printed out, and quoted me a price that made me wince. This is pretty cut and dried, he said. Your wife's not exactly being subtle about it. Give me a week and I'll have enough evidence to bury her in any divorce proceeding. I don't want a divorce, I said. Not yet, anyway. I want to know everything. Who's involved, how long it's been going on, what their end game is. And I want it all documented. Jake raised an eyebrow. What are you planning, Tom? I'm planning to stop being predictable. The lawyer was a shark in a $1,000 suit named Valerie Cho, who came highly recommended and charged accordingly. She looked at the evidence, asked pointed questions about our assets and debts, and gave me advice that was both practical and ruthless. The good news is that your wife has been sloppy, she said. The bad news is that she's not wrong about community property laws. If you want to protect your business and your assets, we need to move fast and smart. What do you recommend? Officially? I recommend you try marriage counseling and work through your problems like adults. She leaned back in her chair. Unofficially, I recommend you let her dig her own grave. Keep documenting everything. Don't let on that you know, and when the time comes, we'll make sure she gets exactly what she deserves. The electronics store was run by a kid who looked like he was barely old enough to drive, but knew more about surveillance technology than the FBI. He sold me cameras the size of shirt buttons, audio equipment that could pick up conversations through walls, and GPS trackers that were virtually undetectable. This is some serious spy stuff, he said as he rang up my order. You sure you're not doing anything illegal? I'm sure, I said. I'm just tired of being the only honest person in my marriage. That evening, I installed cameras in my house, my shop, and Renee's car. I set up audio recording in the kitchen, living room, and bedroom. I activated GPS tracking on her phone and started monitoring her internet activity. Within 48 hours, I had enough evidence to destroy not just my marriage, but half the marriages on Avery Lane. The book club was actually a cover for what could only be described as a suburban swingers club. The monthly game nights at Nicole's were recruitment events for new couples. And my wife wasn't just a participant, she was one of the organizers. But the real kicker came on Thursday night. I was at the shop, supposedly working late, but actually monitoring the live feeds from my house. Renee had invited Bree over for what she told him was a strategy session about convincing me to sell the business. I watched my wife and my best friend have sex in my bed while discussing the best way to manipulate me into giving up everything I'd worked for. He's so ducking naive, Renee said afterward, lying naked next to the man I'd considered a brother. He actually thinks I married him for love. What did you marry him for? Bree asked, lighting a cigarette in my non-smoking house. Security, stability, a nice house in a good neighborhood. She laughed. Plus, he was so grateful to land someone like me, I knew he'd never ask too many questions. And now? Now I'm bored, and you're here, and that shop is worth a lot more than he realizes. What if he won't sell? He will. I've already planted the seeds. European vacation, fresh start, all that bullcrap. And if that doesn't work, she shrugged, there are other ways to motivate someone. Such as? Such as making him think he's losing his mind. Gaslighting is a beautiful thing, Bree. Make someone question their own sanity long enough, and they'll agree to anything just to make it stop. I turned off the feed and sat in my empty shop, surrounded by the tools and equipment I'd spent 15 years accumulating, and felt something I'd never felt before. Pure, cold rage. They wanted to play mind games? Fine. But they were about to learn that the quiet, predictable guy they'd been underestimating had a few surprises of his own. The war for my life was about to begin. Friday morning, I woke up before dawn and did something I hadn't done in months. I made breakfast for my family. Pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice, the works. When Renee came downstairs, she found me humming while I flipped pancakes, already dressed for work. "You're in a good mood," she said cautiously. "Just thinking about what you said, about taking a vacation, starting fresh." I smiled at her, the same trusting smile I'd been giving her for 15 years. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for a change." Her face lit up. "Really? You'd consider selling the shop?" "I'd consider a lot of things. For you." I handed her a plate of pancakes. "Why don't you call Bree today? Have him come over this weekend so we can talk seriously about our options." That's wonderful, Tom. I'm so glad you're being open-minded about this." If she only knew how open-minded I was becoming. Max appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the smell of bacon. "Dad, you made breakfast?" "Figured it was time I started paying more attention to my family," I said, ruffling his hair. "Speaking of which, why don't you invite Jake over this weekend? You guys can hang out while your mom and I talk business with Bree." "Jake's cool with that?" "Jake's mom is going out of town. I already talked to his dad." This was true. I'd called Jim Morrison, Jake's dad and my private investigator, the night before. Jake would be coming over, but not for the reasons Max thought. The twins wandered in next, still in their pajamas, and I made a big show of serving them breakfast and asking about their plans for the weekend. Normal dad stuff. The kind of stuff the old Tom Foster would have done if he hadn't been so busy trying to build a business to support a wife who was already planning to take it away from him. "This is nice," Renee said, watching me interact with our kids. "We should do this more often." "We will," I promised. "Things are going to be very different around here." After breakfast, I kissed Renee goodbye and headed to the shop. But instead of opening for business, I spent the morning setting up what Jake Morrison had called the theater. Cameras positioned to capture every angle of the main work bay, audio equipment hidden in the office, and a few special touches that would come in handy later. Around noon, Bree showed up unannounced. "Tom, Renee said you wanted to talk about selling this place." He looked around the shop like he was already calculating square footage and property values. "I have to say, I'm impressed. You've really built something here." "Thanks. It's been my life for 15 years. And it's been a good life. But imagine what you could do with the capital from a sale. Real estate's booming right now. I could get you top dollar." "What kind of numbers are we talking about?" Bree pulled out his phone and started showing me comparable sales in the area. "Conservatively, I'd say you're looking at $1.2 million for the property and equipment, maybe more if we get a bidding war going. And your commission? 6% standard rate, $72,000. Not bad for betraying your best friend and ducking his wife." "That's a lot of money," I said. "It is. And with Renee's income, you guys could really live anywhere you want. Europe, maybe? I know she's been talking about Italy." Of course she had. "Let me ask you something, Bree. Man to man, do you think I'm making the right choice here?" He put his hand on my shoulder, looked me straight in the eye, and lied to my face. "Tom, you're my oldest friend. I would never steer you wrong. This is the opportunity of a lifetime." "I appreciate that. I really do." I smiled at him. "You know what? Let's do it. Draw up the papers." "Seriously?" "Seriously, but I want to keep this between us for now. Let me break it to the kids gently, you know? They've spent a lot of time here." "Of course. Whatever you need." After he left, I called Valerie Cho. "He took the bait," I told her. "Good. How long before he draws up a listing agreement?" "He'll probably have something ready by Monday. He's motivated. I'll bet he is. Remember, Tom, don't sign anything until I review it, and keep documenting everything. Trust me, I'm just getting started." That evening, I came home to find Renee in the kitchen, practically glowing with excitement. "Bree called," she said. "He said you're ready to list the shop." "I am. You were right, honey. It's time for a new chapter." She threw her arms around me and kissed me like she hadn't in years. "I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to make a change." Brave. Right. "There's just one thing," I said. "I want to throw a party first. Kind of a farewell to the old life, hello to the new life thing. This weekend. Invite everyone." "Everyone?" "The whole neighborhood. Nicole, the Pattersons, the Mitchells, all our friends. I want to celebrate with the people who matter most to us." Renee's smile faltered slightly. "Don't you think that's a little premature? I mean, you haven't even signed the listing agreement yet." "I've made up my mind. The party will make it official." I pulled her closer. "Besides, I want to show everyone how lucky I am. Great wife, great friends, great life. What more could a man ask for?" "Tom, unless you don't want to have a party? I mean, if you're too busy with book club or game nights or whatever." No, of course I want to have a party. It's just, are you sure you're ready for such a big change?" "Honey, I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Saturday morning, I sent out invitations to every household on Avery Lane. Not formal invitations, just a casual text to the neighborhood group chat. "Tom and Renee Foster are having a celebration party tonight at 7 p.m. Food, drinks, and big announcements. Hope to see everyone there." By afternoon, my backyard was transformed. I'd rented tables, chairs, a sound system, and enough food and alcohol to supply a small wedding. The twins were excited about having a real party at our house. Max was helping me set up, though I could tell he was confused about my sudden enthusiasm for socializing. "Dad, are you sure about this?" he asked as we strung lights between the trees. "You hate parties." "I'm learning to appreciate them," I said. "Sometimes you have to step outside your comfort zone to see what's really going on around you." At 6:30, I excused myself to shower and change, but instead of putting on party clothes, I loaded fresh batteries into every recording device I owned. Tonight was going to be memorable, and I wanted to capture every moment. The guests started arriving at 7 sharp. Nicole came first, dressed like she was attending a Hollywood premiere. The Pattersons were next, followed by the Mitchells and half a dozen other couples I barely knew, but who apparently knew each other very well. Bree showed up at 7:15 with a bottle of expensive champagne and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tom, this is quite a spread. What exactly are we celebrating?" "New beginnings," I said, clapping him on the back, "and old friendships." By 8 o'clock, the party was in full swing. People were drinking, laughing, and mingling in the easy way of neighbors who shared more than just property lines. I played the perfect host, making sure everyone's glass was full and everyone felt welcome. At 8:30, I tapped a knife against my beer bottle to get everyone's attention. "If I could have everyone gather around, I'd like to make an announcement." The crowd quieted and formed a loose circle around me. Renee stood to my right, beaming with pride. Bree was directly across from me, champagne glass raised in anticipation. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. When Renee and I moved to Avery Lane 5 years ago, we hoped we'd find a community. What we found was so much more than that. We found family." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "You've welcomed us into your homes, included us in your activities, and made us feel like we belong. Some of you have become closer to us than our own blood relatives." I looked directly at Bree when I said this. He raised his glass higher. "Which is why I wanted you all to be here tonight when I make this announcement. After 15 years of building my business, I've decided it's time for a change." "Here it comes," someone whispered. "I'm selling Foster's Auto Repair." The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. People congratulated me, asked about my plans, wondered what I'd do next. I let the noise build for a moment, then raised my hand for quiet. But that's not the only change I'm making. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You see, over the past few weeks, I've learned some very interesting things about my neighbors, about my friends, about my family." The chatter died away. Renee's smile became uncertain. "I've learned that some of you have been getting together regularly for activities that go well beyond book clubs and game nights. I've learned that my house has been used for these activities while I was working. And I've learned that my wife and my best friend have been planning to take advantage of my trusting nature to steal everything I've worked for." The silence was deafening. "Tom," Renee said quietly, "what are you doing?" "I'm being unpredictable for once." I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. These are pictures from the hidden cameras I installed in my house, my shop, and various vehicles. This first one shows my wife and Bree having sex in my bed last Thursday night. I held up the photo. Several people gasped. Nicole's face went white. This one shows the same two people going through my financial records, looking for accounts they could access after convincing me to sell my business. Another photo. More gasps. And this one shows what Nicole likes to call her key parties, though I think suburban orgy is more accurate. The crowd was starting to back away from me like I was holding a live grenade, which, in a way, I was. "Tom, stop," Renee said. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I? Because I have audio recordings too. Would you like me to play the conversation where you and Bree discuss how naive and pathetic I am? Or maybe the one where you plan to gaslight me into thinking I'm losing my mind?" Bree stepped forward. "Tom, buddy, I think you've had too much to drink. Why don't we go inside and talk about this privately?" "Privately? But Bree, I thought you liked an audience. After all, you've been performing for one every weekend for months." I pulled out my phone and opened the video app. "In fact, I have a whole collection of performances. Should we watch them together? I think your wife might be particularly interested in the one from last Saturday." "You're sick," Nicole spat. "Recording people without their consent is illegal." "Actually, it's not. Not when it's your own house and your own property. I checked with my lawyer." I smiled at her. "Valerie Cho. Maybe you know her? She specializes in divorce cases, very thorough, very ruthless." The crowd was definitely backing away now. Some people were already heading for their cars. "But wait," I called out. "Don't leave yet. I haven't gotten to the best part." I reached into the envelope again and pulled out a legal document. "This is a restraining order against my wife and Brian Dorsey, preventing them from coming within 500 feet of my home or business. It goes into effect at midnight tonight." Renee's face had gone from white to red to a sickly green color. "You can't do this." "I can, I did. And this," I pulled out another document. "This is a lawsuit for alienation of affection, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. I'm suing both of them for damages in the amount of $2.4 million. "That's insane," Bree said. "You'll never make it stick." "Maybe not all of it, but some of it will stick, especially with all the evidence I've collected. Photos, videos, audio recordings, financial records, testimony from witnesses." I gestured to the crowd. "Speaking of which, how many of you would like to avoid being subpoenaed in this case?" The exodus began in earnest. People were practically running for their cars, leaving behind drinks, purses, and any pretense of dignity. "Because here's the thing," I continued, raising my voice to address the fleeing crowd. "I know who was involved in this little suburban adventure club. I have names, dates, photos, and unless certain people want their spouses and employers to see those photos, I suggest they start being very cooperative." Within 5 minutes, my backyard was empty except for me, Renee, Bree, and Max, who had been watching from the kitchen window. "You bastard," Renee hissed. "You've ruined everything." "I've ruined everything? I'm not the one who's been cheating for months. I'm not the one who's been plotting to steal my spouse's business. I'm not the one who's been lying and manipulating and gaslighting. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You got bored with your predictable husband and decided to trade up. The only problem is, you forgot that even predictable people have limits." Bree was backing toward the gate. "Tom, look, maybe we can work something out." "We can. It's very simple. You have until midnight to get your things out of my wife's car, out of my house, and out of my life. After that, any contact with me or my family will be considered a violation of the restraining order." "And then what?" Renee demanded. "You think you can just destroy my life and walk away?" "I'm not destroying your life, Renee. I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. Freedom from your boring, predictable husband. A chance to start fresh. New adventures, new experiences, new opportunities to show everyone how clever and sophisticated you are." I walked over to the gate and opened it. "The only difference is, you'll be doing it without my house, my money, or my kids." After they left, Bree practically running, Renee screaming threats over her shoulder, I found Max still standing in the kitchen. "Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah, son. For the first time in months, I'm okay." "What happens now?" "Now we clean up this mess and figure out what comes next." I put my arm around his shoulders. "But whatever happens, we do it together. You, me, and your sisters." "What about Mom?" I looked out at the backyard, littered with abandoned party supplies and broken dreams. "Your mom made her choice, Max. Now she gets to live with it." The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months without feeling like a stranger in my own house. Renee had packed a bag and left sometime after midnight, though not before trying one last manipulation. She'd woken up Max and the twins, told them I was having a breakdown, and tried to convince them to come stay with her at Nicole's house. Max had refused outright. The twins, confused and scared, had wanted to stay with their father. So Renee had left alone, but not quietly. "This isn't over, Tom," she'd said from the doorway. "You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've started." "I started it?" "I didn't start anything, Renee. I just decided to finish it." Now, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the Sunday paper, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. My phone had been ringing all morning. Reporters, lawyers, neighbors wanting to know what the hell had happened at the party. But I'd turned it off. Today was for my kids and for figuring out what came next. Max appeared in the kitchen around 9, looking like he hadn't slept much. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Weird. It's weird not having Mom here, but also..." He shrugged. "I don't know, it feels more honest, I guess." "What do you mean?" "Like, for months she's been acting like everything was fine, like we were this perfect family. But you could feel it, you know? The fakeness. It was exhausting." The twins came down a few minutes later, still in their pajamas, looking lost. "Where's Mommy?" Grace asked. "She's staying somewhere else for a while," I said carefully. "We're having some grown-up problems that we need to work out." "Are you getting divorced?" Lily asked with the brutal directness of an 11-year-old. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. Maybe." "Good," Grace said matter-of-factly. "She was being mean to you." "Grace, she was, Daddy. We heard her on the phone sometimes saying bad things about you, and she was always lying about where she was going. Kids see everything. I'd forgotten that." "Well, whatever happens between your mom and me, you girls need to know that we both love you very much. That's never going to change." "We know," Lily said. "Can we have pancakes?" And just like that, we were back to normal, or what passed for normal in our new reality. Around noon, Valerie Cho called on my landline. "I saw the news," she said. "Channel 7 ran a story about a neighborhood party gone wrong in the suburbs. They didn't use names, but the description was pretty specific." News travels fast. "Tom, what exactly did you do last night?" I gave her the full rundown of the party, the photos, the public confrontation. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "Well," she said when I finished, "it's not how I would have handled it, but it's not illegal, and it certainly sends a message." "What kind of message?" "That you're not the pushover everyone thought you were. That's going to work in our favor when this goes to court." "When, not if?" "Oh, it's definitely going to court. Renee's already called me twice this morning, threatening to sue you for emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and defamation. Her lawyer's apparently some hotshot from the city who specializes in high-conflict divorces." "Can she win?" "Some of it, maybe. But Tom, you have to understand, you've just declared war, and war is expensive, messy, and unpredictable. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I thought about the video of my wife and my best friend in my bed, talking about how stupid and naive I was. I thought about the months of lies and manipulation and gaslighting. I thought about the plan to steal my business and leave me with nothing. "I'm sure." "Then we fight, but we fight smart. No more public confrontations, no more dramatic gestures. From now on, everything goes through lawyers." "Understood. And Tom, change your locks, today." I spent the afternoon at Home Depot buying new deadbolts and security cameras. When I got home, there was a car I didn't recognize in my driveway, a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver was a man in an expensive suit who looked like he bench-pressed Buicks for fun. He got out when he saw me pull up. "Tom Foster?" "Depends who's asking." "My name is Marcus Webb. I represent your wife in her divorce proceedings." "Great." Renee had hired a lawyer who looked like he moonlighted as a mob enforcer. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say to my lawyer. This is just a friendly conversation. Man to man." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your wife is very upset about what happened last night, very embarrassed. She's willing to be reasonable about the divorce settlement if you're willing to be reasonable about the evidence you've collected." "What kind of reasonable?" 50-50 split of all assets, including the business, joint custody of the children, and all photos, videos, and recordings destroyed." "And if I'm not reasonable?" His smile got wider and colder. "Then things get ugly." Custody battles can be very traumatic for children, Mr. Foster, and small business owners who get involved in public scandals sometimes find it hard to keep their customers. It was a threat, not even a subtle one. You know what's funny about threats? I said, pulling out my phone. They work a lot better when the person you're threatening doesn't have a recording app running. His smile disappeared. Everything you just said is on tape, including the implied threats against my business and my children. I'm sure my lawyer will find it very interesting. You can't. I can. I did. And now you can get off my property before I call the police and report you for harassment and intimidation. He got back in his Mercedes without another word. But I had a feeling this was just the opening salvo. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat in my garage and took inventory. Financially, I was in decent shape. The business was profitable, the house was nearly paid off, and I'd been smart enough to keep separate accounts that Renee didn't know about. Legally, I had enough evidence to bury her in any divorce proceeding. Emotionally, well, that was more complicated. 15 years of marriage don't just disappear overnight, even when you discover your wife has been betraying you. There were good memories mixed in with the bad ones, times when I genuinely believed we were happy, that we were building something together. But then I remembered the conversation I'd overheard, where she'd called marrying me a business decision, where she'd laughed about how grateful I was to land someone like her. Maybe the good memories were just better lies. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This isn't over. You've made a lot of enemies tonight. Watch your back. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Valerie Cho with a note. Evidence file #47. Then I poured myself a beer, opened my laptop, and started planning my next move. If Renee wanted a war, she'd get one. But she was about to learn that her boring, predictable husband had been paying attention all these years. And I'd learned a few things about strategy, patience, and the element of surprise. The battle for my life was just beginning. Monday morning brought two pieces of news that changed everything. The first came from Jake Morrison, my private investigator, who called at 7 a.m. with information that made my coffee taste like ash. Tom, we've got a problem. I've been monitoring your wife's activities like you asked, and she's not just planning a divorce. She's planning to destroy you. What do you mean? She's been in contact with 3 of your biggest commercial clients, telling them you're having a mental breakdown. She's got testimonials from neighbors saying you've been acting erratically, drinking heavily, neglecting your business. My stomach dropped. Which clients? Henderson Trucking, Metro Construction, and Riverside Auto Group. They represent about 60% of your monthly revenue. 60%. If I lost those contracts, I'd have to close the shop within 6 months. There's more. She's also filed a complaint with Child Protective Services claiming you're an unfit parent. They're opening an investigation. Based on what? Based on the party Saturday night. She's saying you had a psychotic episode, threatened people with weapons, exposed children to inappropriate material. That's all lies. I know that, you know that, but CPS doesn't know that yet. They're going to want to interview you and the kids. The second piece of news came an hour later, when Max didn't come down for breakfast. I found him in his room, sitting on his bed with his laptop open, staring at the screen with a look of horror. Dad, you need to see this. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a Facebook page titled, The Truth About Tom Foster. It was filled with photos from Saturday night's party, but they'd been edited to make it look like I was drunk, aggressive, threatening people. There were fake testimonials from concerned neighbors describing my increasingly erratic behavior. There was even a doctored audio clip that made it sound like I was screaming at my children. How many people have seen this? It's been shared 47 times since yesterday. And there's more. He clicked to another page. Someone posted flyers around the neighborhood with your picture and the word unstable in big red letters. I sat down heavily on his bed. This was psychological warfare at its finest, and I was losing. Dad, what are we going to do? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a woman in a business suit standing on my porch with a clipboard. CPS, I said. Max, take your sisters to school. Use the back door. Don't talk to anyone about what's happening at home. But Dad, go now. I'll handle this. The CPS worker was a tired-looking woman named Sarah Chen, who'd clearly been doing this job too long. She asked to come inside, looked around the house with the practiced eye of someone trained to spot signs of neglect or abuse, and asked me a series of questions about my mental health, my relationship with my children, and the events of Saturday night. Mr. Foster, I have to ask, have you been drinking more than usual lately? No. Have you been experiencing mood swings, depression, or thoughts of harming yourself or others? No. Have you ever used illegal drugs in front of your children? No. She made notes after each answer, her expression giving nothing away. I'm going to need to interview your children separately, she said. Standard procedure. They're at school. I'll arrange to speak with them there. In the meantime, I need you to understand that this investigation is serious. If we find evidence of neglect or abuse, we'll have no choice but to remove the children from your home. After she left, I called Valerie Cho. They're playing dirty, I told her. Dirtier than I expected. This Marcus Webb character doesn't mess around. But Tom, we can fight this. The Facebook page is clearly defamatory. We can get it taken down and sue for damages. The CPS complaint will fall apart once they actually investigate. And the client situation, she paused. Well, that's trickier. What do you mean? Business relationships are based on trust. Even if we can prove your wife is lying, the damage to your reputation might be permanent. Some of these clients might decide it's not worth the risk to keep working with you. So, what do I do? You fight back, but carefully, methodically, and you document everything. That afternoon, I drove to Henderson Trucking to speak with Bob Henderson, who'd been a client for 8 years. His secretary told me he was in a meeting, but I could see him through his office window, and he could see me. He made a phone call, and 5 minutes later, security escorted me out of the building. Metro Construction wouldn't even let me in the front door. At Riverside Auto Group, I finally got a chance to speak with the owner, Jim Riverside. Tom, I've known you for 6 years, he said. You've always done good work for us, but I can't have my business associated with whatever this is. Jim, it's all lies. My wife is trying to destroy me in the divorce. None of what she's telling people is true. Maybe not, but true or not, it's out there. My customers are asking questions. My insurance company is asking questions. I can't afford to take the risk. What if I can prove it's all fabricated? Then maybe we can talk. But until then, he shrugged apologetically. I'm sorry, Tom. I really am. By the end of the day, I'd lost all 3 major contracts. 15 years of building relationships, gone in 48 hours. That evening, I sat the kids down and explained what was happening. Mom is trying to make people think I'm a bad person and a bad father, I said. She's telling lies about me to try to win the divorce. That's stupid, Grace said. Anyone who knows you knows you're not bad. Unfortunately, not everyone knows me as well as you do. So, for the next few weeks, things might be difficult. People might ask you questions about me, about our family. I need you to tell the truth, but I also need you to be careful. What kind of questions? Max asked. About whether I've been drinking or yelling or acting strange. About whether you feel safe at home. But we do feel safe, Lily said. Safer than when Mom was here. I know, but some people might not believe that. The next few days were a nightmare of bureaucracy and legal maneuvering. The CPS worker interviewed each of my children, searched my house, and requested medical records and employment history. My lawyer filed motions to get the Facebook page taken down and to stop Renee from contacting my business associates. Renee's lawyer filed countermotions claiming I was harassing his client and demanding that I be forced to undergo psychological evaluation. Through it all, I kept working. With my major contracts gone, I focused on smaller jobs, oil changes, brake repairs, the kind of basic maintenance work that kept neighborhood cars running. The pay was less, but it was steady, and it kept me busy while the lawyers fought their battles. On Thursday, Jake Morrison called with news that changed everything. Tom, I've been digging into your wife's finances, and I found something interesting. She's been moving money. What kind of money? Large amounts. Over the past 3 months, she's transferred almost $40,000 from your joint accounts into accounts I can't trace. Offshore stuff, maybe. $40,000? That's not all. Remember that burner phone you found? I've been monitoring it, and she's been in contact with someone in the Cayman Islands. Looks like she's been planning this divorce for a lot longer than you thought. How long? At least 6 months, maybe longer. Tom, I think she's been systematically hiding assets in preparation for the divorce. If I'm right, she's committed fraud on a massive scale. This was the break I'd been waiting for. Financial fraud was a federal crime, and it would give me leverage in both the divorce proceedings and the custody battle. Can you prove it? I'm working on it, but I need more time and more resources. This kind of investigation isn't cheap. Do it, whatever it costs. There's something else. That lawyer of hers, Marcus Webb, He's got a reputation. He's been involved in 3 other cases where the husband died under suspicious circumstances during divorce proceedings. Died? Accidents? Car crashes? Falls? That kind of thing? Nothing that could be proven, but the pattern is concerning. A chill ran down my spine. Are you saying? I'm saying be careful, Tom. Watch your back, and maybe consider hiring some security. That night, I installed additional locks on all the doors and windows. I set up motion sensors around the property, and I made sure my gun safe was easily accessible. If Renee wanted to play for keeps, I'd play for keeps. But I'd play to win. The end came on a Friday morning in October, exactly 6 weeks after the party that had started it all. I was at the shop, working on a brake job for Mrs. Patterson, ironically, one of the few neighbors who'd remained loyal after the scandal, when Jake Morrison called with news that made my hands shake. Tom, we got her. The financial investigation is complete, and it's worse than we thought. How much worse? She didn't just hide $40,000. She's been systematically looting your accounts for over a year. The total is closer to $200,000. I sat down hard on my mechanic's stool. $200,000 was almost everything I'd saved over 15 years of marriage. But here's the beautiful part, Jake continued. She got greedy. The offshore accounts she was using, they're connected to a money laundering operation that the FBI has been investigating. When they trace the money flow, they're going to find her right in the middle of it. Is she going to jail? If the feds decide to prosecute, absolutely. We're talking about wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. She could be looking at 10 to 15 years. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. What do we do now? Now we spring the trap, but we do it right, with maximum impact. Are you ready to end this? I've been ready since the day I found that burner phone. The plan Jake outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We would wait until Renee made her next move, and according to our intelligence, that move was coming soon. She'd been planning what her lawyer called a nuclear option. A public press conference where she would accuse me of domestic violence, financial abuse, and psychological manipulation. The goal was to destroy my reputation so completely that I'd have no choice but to accept whatever settlement she offered. The press conference was scheduled for Monday morning at the downtown courthouse. Every local news station had been invited. Renee had even hired a public relations firm to manage the media coverage. She had no idea that I would be there too, with evidence that would destroy her instead. Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove downtown with Jake Morrison and Valerie Cho. We arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes before the scheduled press conference and took positions in the back of the crowd. Renee appeared at exactly 11 a.m., flanked by Marcus Webb and a woman I didn't recognize who was probably the PR consultant. She looked perfect, hair and makeup professionally done, wearing a conservative blue dress that made her look vulnerable and sympathetic. The performance that followed was masterful. She spoke about the years of emotional abuse she'd endured, the financial control I'd exercised over her, the threats and intimidation that had forced her to flee our home in fear for her safety. She cried at exactly the right moments, her voice breaking when she talked about our children and how they'd been traumatized by my behavior. "I'm speaking out today," she said, looking directly into the cameras, "because no woman should have to suffer in silence. No child should have to live in fear of their own father. Tom Foster is a dangerous man, and I pray that the courts will protect my children from him." It was a devastating performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. When she finished, Marcus Webb stepped to the microphone. "Mrs. Foster will not be taking questions at this time, but we will be filing additional motions this afternoon seeking emergency custody of the children and immediate seizure of Mr. Foster's business assets to prevent him from hiding them offshore." That was my cue. I stood up in the back of the crowd and raised my hand. "I have a question." Every camera in the place swung toward me. Renee's face went white when she saw me. "Mr. Foster," Marcus Webb said quickly, "this is not an appropriate venue. Actually, it's the perfect venue," I said, walking toward the front of the crowd. "Since my wife has chosen to make public accusations against me, I think the public deserves to hear the whole truth." I reached the podium and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, my name is Tom Foster, and I'm here to respond to my wife's allegations with facts." Security moved toward me, but Valerie Cho stepped forward with a court document. "My client has every right to respond to public allegations," she said. "This is a public forum." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. "This is a federal warrant for Renee Foster's arrest on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. It was issued this morning based on evidence that she has stolen over $200,000 from our joint accounts and hidden the money in offshore accounts connected to a criminal organization. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Renee tried to run, but FBI agents who had been waiting in unmarked cars surrounded the courthouse steps. This is also a court order, I continued, pulling out another document, awarding me full custody of our children based on evidence that Mrs. Foster has been engaging in prostitution, drug use, and child endangerment. That's a lie! Renee screamed as the FBI agents placed her in handcuffs. And this, I said, holding up a flash drive, contains over 40 hours of audio and video recordings that document Mrs. Foster's adultery, her conspiracy to defraud me of my business, and her systematic campaign to destroy my reputation through false accusations. Marcus Webb was backing away from the podium, clearly trying to distance himself from his client. The recordings also document Mr. Webb's attempts to intimidate me and his threats against my children, I added. I believe the State Bar Association will find those recordings very interesting. As Renee was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. You think you've won? She shouted. You think this is over? I'll destroy you, Tom Foster. I'll destroy everything you care about. You already tried, I said calmly. It didn't work. The press conference descended into chaos. Reporters swarmed me with questions, but I had nothing more to say. The evidence would speak for itself. That afternoon, I picked up my children from school and took them home to our house on Avery Lane, the house that was now truly ours, free from lies and manipulation and betrayal. Is Mom really going to jail? Max asked as we sat around the kitchen table. Yes, for a long time. Good, Grace said matter-of-factly. She was mean. What happens now? Lily asked. Now we rebuild, I said. We figure out how to be a family again. We learn to trust each other, and we move forward. Together? Max asked. Together. 6 months later, I reopened Foster's Auto Repair with a new location, new equipment, and most of my old clients back. The scandal had actually helped my business in an unexpected way. People respected the fact that I'd fought back against injustice and won. Renee was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Marcus Webb was disbarred and is currently under investigation for witness intimidation and conspiracy. Nicole Brennan moved away after her husband divorced her and took custody of their children. The house on Avery Lane is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from peace rather than secrets. My children are thriving. Max is applying to colleges. The twins have joined the soccer team and are making new friends. And me? I'm learning to be happy again, learning to trust again, learning that sometimes the best way to handle betrayal is to stand up, fight back, and refuse to be a victim. Renee was wrong about one thing. I wasn't predictable after all. I was just patient.